right, y'all, time for problem 29. I've already copied it out here. I've got to factor my denominators to help me find my excluded values. From here, I know my excluded value is 0. Here I can do greatest common factor. My excluded value from the 2a part is again 0. My excluded value from a plus 1, if a plus 1 equals 0, then a equals negative 1. So those are my excluded values. I put brackets around the whole thing. And I find my common denominator. My common denominator has to represent every single piece that's in the denominator. So it has to have a 2, which will take care of that and that. It has to have an a, which will take care of that and that. And it has to have an a plus 1, which will take care of that. So I see what's going to cancel in each one. Here, the 2 is going to cancel, the a is going to cancel, sorry, the a plus 1 is going to cancel. Everything's going to cancel except my a minus 6. Here, the 2 is going to cancel, but I'm still going to have an a and an a plus 1 times 1. And I'm writing the 1 for overkill just so you can see. All right, equals. That a will cancel with that a, so I still am going to have a 2 and an a plus 1 and a 3a minus 15. Now I need to FOIL everything out and do like terms because my denominator is gone. So let's do that. 1 times a is a times a is a squared, a times 1 is a. Over here, I'm going to FOIL these two and then distribute the 2. Well, it doesn't matter. You can FOIL these two, then distribute the 2, or you can distribute the 2 to the first one and then FOIL. I'm going to FOIL and then distribute the 2. So a times 3a is 3a squared. A times negative 15 is negative 15a. 1 times 3a is 3a. 1 times negative 15 is negative 15. Negative 15 and 3 would make negative 12a. So 3a squared minus 12a minus 15, and I've got to distribute the 2. So 2 times 3a squared would be 6a squared minus 24a minus 30. 2 times 15 would be, give me 30. So now I've got everything distributed out, and I see that it's a quadratic equation, so I've got to get everything equal to 0. So I'm going to move everything over there. So 6a squared minus a squared is going to leave me with 5a squared. Over here, I've got 1a, 2a's. When I move it over here, it becomes a negative 2a. Negative 6, when I move it over, becomes positive 6, and that leaves me with negative 24. Now I have a general trinomial. I multiply 5 times 24, and I get 120, and I need the factors of 120 that will subtract to give me 26, and I just saw it in my head, 30 and 4. 30 take away 4 would give me 26. Okay. To get a negative 26, it's going to have to be a negative 30 and a positive 4. Draw my box. 5a squared minus 30a plus 4a minus 24. These two have in common 5a. These two have in common a positive 4. Power player is positive. These two have in common an a. These two have in common a negative 6. So that factors a minus 6, 5a plus 4. From here, I get a equals 6. It's not an excluded value, so I'm okay. And from here, I get a equals negative 4/5. Think about that in your head. Move the 4 over and make it negative, then divide by 5. That's also not an excluded value, So there are my answers. All right. Now, problem 30 is an inequality. I noticed that only 3 of you did the inequality homework. It was assigned on Friday and it was due Saturday night at 10. Okay. I made it due Saturday night at 10 because y'all already had something due on Friday. I've been very gracious and given quite a bit of time to get assignments done, but only 3 of the 9 of you turned that in. So tomorrow when we Zoom, we'll talk about that. All right, so this is an inequality. When you do an inequality, the first thing you do is find the excluded values. So my excluded value from here is going to be 0. My excluded value from here, still 0. There's no variable here, so nothing excluded there. You pretend like it's an equal. And the 3 of you that did it and turned it in on time, I'm going to make sure you get some extra credit. All right, put brackets around the whole thing. And I need to find the common denominator of 4a, 8a, and 2. Well, 4, 8, and 2 all go into 8. And A both go into A. So the common denominator is 8a. 4a will cancel into 8a and just leave me with a 2. 2 times 1 is 2. 8a will cancel into 8a and leave me with 1. 1 times 5 is 5. 2 will cancel into 8a 4 times. 4 times 1 is 4, and the a doesn't cancel, so it's 4a. Add the 2 together. Divide by 4. A equals 7/4. But this is an inequality. So I draw a number line. And guys, if you look at the videos that I did of the inequalities, I lay this out step by step for you. On the number line, you put anything that's an excluded value, and you put any answer that you find. Excluded values are always open circles. This tells me 7/4 is an open circle. Now I have 3 places to test. Test here, test here, test here. So let's test -1. I test it in the original. 1 divided by 4 times -1 would be -4. This would be -1/4 plus 5 divided by 8 times -1 would be -8. That'd be -5/8 is greater than 1/2. Now guys, use common sense. That's a negative. That's a negative. If you add 2 negatives, it's a negative. Can a negative ever be bigger than positive 1/2? No. So nothing to shade there. Now I'm going to test 1. So it's going to be 1 over 4 times 1, which is 1/4, plus 5 over 8 times 1, which is 5/8, greater than 1/2. 5/8 is already greater than 1/2. And then you add another 1/4 to it. Don't bother to do the math. Use common sense. 5/8 is already bigger than 1/2, so this is true. So I shade that part. Now I got to test something bigger than 7/4. 7/4 is 1 3/4, so I'm going to test 2. 1 over 4 times 2 is 1/8, plus 8 times 2 is 16. That's 5/16, greater than 1/2. Question mark. This is 2/16. 1/8 would be 2/16. 2/16 and 5/16 would be 7/16. 1/2 would be 8/16. 7/16 is bigger than 8/16. That would be false. So this is my answer written on a number line. Let's write it in set notation. Or that's, inequality notation. And then in set notation, it looks like this. I would accept any of these 3 answers. Okay. One more out of this batch. I'd like to do 31. and then we'll look at the graphing on another video. Okay. Nothing to factor, oh, you can't see it. Now you can. Nothing to factor in the denominator, so let's find my excluded values. My only excluded value is x equals 1, because that's the only thing that makes this denominator 0. Put brackets around the whole thing. My common denominator has to have a 1, which they all have, an x minus 1, and a 6. So we're going to do 6, x minus 1. Okay? That 1 will not cancel 6x minus 1, 6, x minus 1. So I have to multiply that by 1, which gives me 6, x minus 1, plus x minus 1 will cancel x minus 1, just leaving me with the 6. 6 times 5 is 30. The 6 will cancel the 6, leaving me with x minus 1 times 7. Distribute that out. Distribute this out. Do the math. And I'm just working it out because I'm really tired of talking. I've done so many of these videos today that I'm about fried. Okay, so I'll let you look at that a second. I got x is 31. While you're looking at that, we'll put it on the number line. There's 1, there's 31. Excluded values are always open circles. This had an underbar, so this is a filled-in circle. And now I've got a test here, here, and here. So let's test 0. 1 over 1 is just 1. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. 5 over negative 1 is negative 5. 1 plus 5 is negative 4. Negative 4 is less than 7/6. That's true, because it's negative, and a negative is always less than a positive. Test something in here. I'm going to test 6, and you'll see why I'm choosing 6, because it'll plug in nicely. 1 over 1 is 1. 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 over 5 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 is less than 7/6. Nope, that is false, so I'm not going to shade. Because if one thing in here is false, all things in here are false. So now let's go here to 32. Let's test 32. 1 over 1 is still 1. 32 take away 1 is 31, so that's 5 over 31. Now, think with me a minute. 7/6 is 1 and 1/6. Okay? So there's the 1. So the question is 5/31 smaller than a 1/6? Well, if you punch it in on a calculator, you'll see pretty quick it is. 5 over 30 equals a 1/6. So 5 over 31 is smaller than a 1/6. So this whole thing is smaller than 1 and 1/6, so that is true. And I'm shading everything up here. Okay, so there's my answer on a number line. Let's write it in set notation. Negative infinity to 1, union with 31, which is a bracket because it's included, to infinity. Or we can also write x is less than 1 or x is greater than or equal to 31. I will accept any of these three. And that is problem 31.